Hamutakiapi, Ampetuashte, Vani Machiapi, Gaka James Wambliwaka Imachiapi, Nakusi Hasapa Hematahayelo. Good afternoon, my friends. My name is Vaughn Vargas. My great-grandfather was James Holy Eagle Sr. I am from the Sihasapa band of the Cheyenne River Sioux tribe, and to my knowledge, I will be the only industrial engineer from my tribe. I am what you would consider a typical Native American, as I have faced much of the adversity that plagues our Native American communities locally and nationally. However, I was fortunate to have overcome this adversity to become quite the accomplished individual. And today I get to share with you two of the most important aspects of my life: my Lakota culture and my education in engineering. My presentation is titled, Using Science, Technology, Engineering, and Math, or STEM, to Protect and Evolve Lakota Culture. And I will be doing so using three examples: security printing and anti-counterfeiting technology, animation software, and Lakota constellations, and cattle integration of bison. So, let's get started. I'd like to advert your attention to this beautiful piece of artwork. This is a buffalo skull with what appears to be an engraved Native American chief on the front. And this was made by an artist from the great Lakota Nation. Oh wait, excuse me. Let me correct that. It was made by an artist from the great nation of China. Made in China. And you'll see products like this that fill tourist shops both locally and nationally. And that's okay, but you may often see it paired with manipulative marketing such as this. So notice the price tag that covers the Made in China sticker. Or even the second example, where you're not entirely sure if it's authentic Native American artwork or not. And this isn't. This is from a dream catcher that was purchased in western South Dakota. And this is problematic because in our closest reservation, the Pine Ridge Reservation, the economic climate has a tribal unemployment rate of 80%. One report by Catherine McCloskey, historicizing the growing impoverishment of Native American artists, states that 80% of the 1.5 billion fake Native American artwork is made by non-native and imported to the US from Asia. Another report, the First Peoples Fund, is the Native American Creative Economy Report, states that 51% of residents of Pine Ridge rely on a home-based enterprise for cash. And of that 51%, 79% use some form of traditional art. So this is problematic, but what does it have to do with STEM? Well, that's a good question, and I'm glad that you asked. So I'm a student at the South Dakota School of Mines and Technology, and I've done research for Dr. John Keller and Dr. Grant Crawford. That research was security printing and anti-counterfeiting technology. And counterfeiting is a global problem. The International Anti-Counterfeiting Coalition estimates the 2015 value of counterfeit and pirated goods of $1.7 trillion. And this is your pharmaceuticals, this is your electronics, this is your clothing, you name it. So what security printing and anti-counterfeiting technology does is it uses up-converting nanoparticles. And these particles are undetectable until they're excited with a near-infrared laser. And once they're excited, they emit a fluorescent light. Well, these nanoparticles can be printed in the form of a quick response code. As you see on the pill, there's an excited QR code. But the QR code can store 4,000 alphanumerical characters. It can be linked directly to a website. It can have track and trace features. It has numerous applications. Applying this to the Native American arts, crafts, and antiquities market can revolutionize how we're selling Native American arts and crafts both locally and nationally. So imagine you walked into a store and you've seen a beautiful piece of artwork similar to what we have here at the Doll, and you wanted to ensure that it was made by a Native American. Let's say you had a smartphone and you knew exactly where to scan, and it brought you to a page like this, where it tells you the artist, the tribal affiliation, the cultural significance of the item, and also the inspiration leading to that particular design. Well, We may just have a solution to our fake Native American artwork problem. And not only that, but we can facilitate a way to help local artists provide for their families, especially in these impoverished tribal communities. What a great thing. Well, moving on. So as a way of assimilating Native Americans into mainstream society, the 1883 Court of Indian Offenses declared it illegal for Native Americans to practice their culture. And some Lakota elders remember being severely punished for speaking their language. This has produced some devastating statistics. Recently, Max O'Connell of the Rapid City Journal reported that there's 2,000 Lakota speakers. Well, there's more than 82,000 Lakota tribal members. Since less than 3% of Lakota people speak the language, it is considered a threatened language. At the loss of this language also comes at the expense of cultural and spiritual knowledge, the traditional oral history, and most importantly, our identity. Luckily, there's been a resurgence in how Lakota language is being taught, and we have immersion programs, and it's being implemented within tribal and local school systems. Absolutely great. But what does this have to do with STEM? Well, it's a good question. I'm glad that you asked. So I want to give a special thanks to Tom Durkin and South Dakota School of Mines and the South Dakota Space Grant Consortium. So they funded a project that I'm doing, and I'm creating a series of videos accessible through mobile devices. And what I'm doing is I'm using animation software to bring Lakota constellations to life, telling cultural significance of these constellations, and also incorporating our sacred sites as well. So if you'd be so kind and gather around this campfire with me, I'd like to tell you a story. And this is the story of Tapu Shawi. Now, Tapu Shawi was this beautiful Lakota girl, absolutely gorgeous, and she had very high standards. It wasn't until one day a gentleman floated into her camp, and they said he was so smooth, it was as if he floated, and he had this mysticism about him. And when these two saw each other, they fell in love, and they were absolutely enamored by each other. So this gentleman is Starman, and Starman asked for Red Cheek Woman's hand in marriage, and their parents said yes. Well, Starman said, I am from the Machpia Oyate, which means beyond the cloud people. I am a spiritual being from the heavens, and if we get married, we have to return to my people. So it was agreed. They would get married, and they returned to the heavens, where they were very happy, and they actually became a child. Well, Red Cheek Woman was told, here in the heavens, everything's very similar to Earth, but it's much, much bigger. So please be careful. Well, one day she took a walk, and she came across the Timsila, which is a wild turnip. And it reminds her of home. So she starts digging and digging and digging, and she uproots this turnip. And it leaves a big hole in the ground. And through this hole, she saw her village. And it just deepened her homesickness. She wanted to see her friends, and she wanted to see her family. So she takes everything she owns, and she makes this really, really long rope. And she's going to climb down, and she's going to see her friends and family. But unfortunately, she fell. She didn't survive. Well, the child does, and the child would go on to be a Lakota legend named Chakpi Hinkpaya, which means fallen star. But Starman walks back to his camp, and he looks at this hole and looks down it and sees that Red Cheek Woman had passed away. He became severely sad. It is said he had walked 10 paces north, sat down, and he's never moved again. Well, this is the story of the North Star, Chakpi Onwanjula, the one that never moves. So what I hope to do with my videos is to animate stories like this as a way of enticing people to learn the culture. It is my vision that each one of my videos be translated entirely into Lakota. But being the engineer in me, what I would really like to do is stimulate interest in young people to look to math, science, engineering, and technology, or STEM. What we have here is the Butterfly Nebula. And I would hope to use pictures like this and general knowledge of these celestial bodies and pair it with the culture. And we have a Kamimila butterfly hairpin. Well, they look very similar. So this is my vision. It is such an exciting project. and I'm starting to cover a lot of ground, and it's what I love to do. So, moving on. In May of 2016, President Barack Obama signed the National Bison Legacy Act into law. And this makes the bison our national mammal. Well, that's interesting because in the 1800s, the federal government facilitated the decimation of the bison as a way of weakening tribes for westward expansion. U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service estimates the bison population to have been between 30 to 75 million. But by the end of the 1800s, there was only 300 wild bison left. So today's bison population is either owned by a tribe or privately by citizens. This decimation is tragic. But what does it have to do with science, technology, engineering, and math? That's a good question. Get into that right now. But looking at the culture, the bison is a cultural icon among Lakota people. We actually consider ourselves the Pate Oyate, which means Buffalo Nation. And the bison are so revered, you'll see bison incorporated into various spiritual and cultural items. So the men would hunt the bison, but it was actually the women who tended to matters concerning the bison after the hunt, like dressing and tanning the hide, or using the hide or other elements to make clothing and other items for a family. It was actually the women who own the hide that constructs the teepee. We do all of our hunting at Walmart nowadays, so it's really hard to translate these tasks into modern day jobs. But I would like to focus specifically on one person, one Lakota woman who's tending to matters on the front end of the bison. But before we can do that, we need to talk about the bison rejuvenation. So in the 1800s, ranchers had to find a way to increase the gene diversity of bison and increase the gene pool. And they did so by breeding bison with domestic cattle. And you would get a hybrid offspring, which is a cattle or a beefalo. It just depends on the more prominent genes present. As a result of this, there's mitochondrial and nuclear evidence of cattle introgression in 8 of the 14 public herds in US and Canada. And this is my sister, Lakota Vargas, and she is pursuing her undergraduate in conservation biology at Lakota College. And her research is looking at gene diversity and blood purity of bison. In this picture, she's amplifying certain DNA fragments to look for evidence of cattle introgression for the bison herd for the Oglala Sioux tribe. And it's important that we have genetically pure bison because the hybrid species isn't protected by the Endangered Species Act, nor does it have taxonomic status. Considering how important bison are among Lakota people, I really can't think of a greater deed and someone so dedicated to this work. It's absolutely amazing, and I love how it translates into a modern day job. Well, I've given you 3 examples of how Native people have been oppressed throughout history and how it continues today. We have fake Native American artwork being sold, which is okay, but it compromises the ability for local artists to provide for their families. Security printing and anti-counterfeiting technology can combat that and facilitate this revenue to keep money local. A culture and language once forbidden to practice and speak is now being rejuvenated through immersion schools and animation and software. The bison, a great resource and cultural icon, is being refined and its genetic integrity is being preserved through conservation biologists. These are but 3 examples of how science, technology, engineering, and math is impacting Lakota culture. So what I'm doing is I am dedicating my career to use research as an economic driver for remote tribal communities so we can continue to generate ideas worth sharing. So I will leave you with one quote from Chief Sitting Bull. And let us put our minds together and see what life we can make for our children. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for this opportunity.